Today we're talking about the middle way in an argument. People are really uncomfortable with the idea of moderation in any argument or debate. It could be a political thing, it could be religious, really anything that people have the capacity to disagree about. If you say, I agree with you, people like that. If you say, I disagree, they kind of like that too, because then they can fight with you. They can argue. They can take that and use it as fuel to put on the fire so that they can continue to prod and antagonize and jab and keep that banter going. But what people don't like is for you to say, I agree with you, and I think that the points you make are good, and I think you're right. And I also think that the other side of the argument makes valid points too, and it's right in its own way. And you aren't completely right, nor completely wrong. And the same goes for the other side. People don't know what to make of that. And they hate it. Because when you support them by validating their position, by saying, I don't disagree with you completely, I do see the validity of your claims and your points that you're making, that takes away the ability to really fight. You can't fight with somebody who's telling you that you're making good points. But there's also no victory lap there, because when you go to bat for the other side too, that leaves people not really knowing what to say or where to go from there. Because they want to be able to fight against their opponents. They want to be able to say, kudos for agreeing with me, or shame on you for being wrong. And when you're right in the middle, agreeing with the part of the argument that makes sense, and also agreeing with the part of the other side of the debate that makes sense, seeing good in both, but not completely agreeing with either, people just don't want anything to do with you. Because most people live their lives completely governed by hatred and ego. If they're slandering someone, they're happy. And if they're building up themselves, they're happy. But outside of that, they have no capacity to have peace in their lives. And so they're always looking for people that are going to either validate them or people who they can fight. And when they find someone who they can't do that with, someone who doesn't want to participate in the water cooler gossip about other people, somebody who doesn't want to slander positions that are different than their own, someone who wants to see positive things in life, and someone who's pragmatic enough to also take a stand against things that are seemingly good when they're flawed. That's not a popular thing. People do not like that. It makes them uncomfortable. They don't know how to react, because in their mind they want to say, this is a believer or a heathen. This is a conservative or a liberal. We have buckets. And everyone has to be in one of those buckets. And if you're in the good bucket, then you're an ally. If you're in the bad bucket, you're an enemy. And if somebody chooses not to be in either bucket, those kinds of people, and that's most people, will treat you like you don't exist. They will try to suck you into their drama, and if it doesn't work, then they will try to find another host. It's really hard to stop seeing life through the lens of negatives. It's so easy to start off a Monday with the latest gossip about, did you hear what that person did? I can't believe that person is so stupid or so ridiculous. Or, did you see what happened on the news? Like, we go through these motions of being negative about everything, complaining about everything. I go to work, and you know what's funny? What's funny is that every person that I work with slanders every other person that I work with behind their back. So, like, at the office, there'll be one person who I work with, and they'll be talking crap about the other one. And then that one gets up to go to the bathroom, and then the other one pipes up to talk crap about the one that's not there. Like, that's just how it is. And the truth is, they're both full of it. Like, it's both of them, in my opinion, are a little off the rails, right? But what they love to do is to speak poorly about other people. They have their own brand of it. It's kind of like two alcoholics, and one of them drinks wine and the other one drinks beer. And they think that they're different because they are addicted to different types of alcohol. But at the end of the day, they're both just drunks. They might see themselves differently, but to a person who's not a drunk, they're in the exact same bucket. Just a different aisle of the liquor store, that's all. Now, the challenge is not to identify people like that. The challenge is to not be a person like that. And for me, what that means is I have to spend more time learning how to be alone, learning how to shut my mouth, learning how to be content, being present in what I'm doing, and not thinking about what other people are or are not doing. And I understand there may be some times when our jobs require us to have a certain level of awareness about what other people are doing. If you are responsible for managing other people, then you are going to have to play a role in paying attention to what they are doing. But there's a difference between approaching these things through the lens of an administrative task and trying to do your job well, and being a person who feeds their ego at the expense of other people. A person who enjoys gossip because it gives them a sense of value. You can let go of those emotional things and still do the procedural things that you need to do in life. There are boundaries and limits and things that must be enforced, things that must be protected, but you do not have to enjoy being at odds with other people and get a high off of putting other people down. And the truth is, most of the things that people say about other people in the name of talking about things that need to be addressed is really just gossip. Just like most of the things you do when you're looking at your news feed are nothing to do with being well informed because you need to make good business decisions. And it's just boredom because it's easy to scroll through random stuff on your phone. And we have to be aware of this, and we need to be honest about this, because these are things that deprive us of a lot of time and quality peace in our lives. When we're more interested in being confrontational and being passive aggressive and finding fault in other people, instead of just doing what we need to do and doing it well, and then when we are done, letting it go. Instead of that, we want to be at the center of some kind of drama all the time. The best way to avoid that is to learn the discipline of silence. Sometimes when you don't have something you need to say, you just need to be quiet and do what you came here to do. Do your job, do your duty. And if you don't need to say anything to do your duty, then you can just be quiet. And other people are going to expect you to be wrapped up in their drama. They'll want you to be. They'll try to drag you into it. You don't need to correct them. You just need to be quiet. That's all it is. See, we think that this is complicated, but really it's just about learning to be quiet. Because when you think that you want to open your mouth and say something, that's usually when you'd be best quiet. Then, of course, there's other times when you feel like you don't want to say anything, when it takes courage for you to speak up. And in those moments, you probably should find courage to have a voice. And that's a really good barometer in general of what should guide your actions. Because what seems to be the tempting and easy thing is more often than not the wrong thing. So let that be a guide. The things that we say about people that are just fun to say, conversation starters, random political arguments, probably 75% of the things that are tempting to click on in the YouTube feed. We just need to let that stuff go. And be a nice person. I think we all believe that we're nice people. Until we actually acknowledge that maybe we're not. And then we actually start listening to ourselves. And we start listening to the voices that are inside of us. Maybe the things we don't say, just the things that we passively think. If we're honest. And we realize we have some work to do. Whatever's pure and just and honest and loving, uplifting, edifying, think about those things. Initially, sometimes it's hard to really regulate your thoughts. But it is easier to regulate your words. And if you start to regulate your words, and you do that enough, it has a tendency to change the way you think too. And it's also really good to learn to be alone. Because sometimes you can't avoid people. Because it's your job to be around people. You are going to have some people in your life. You should have people in your life. But when you have a lot of people in your life, it's really hard to be in control of the kind of things that you are feeding your mind. Because you become at the mercy of other people's content. But if you can learn to be alone, then you can choose what you want to feed your mind. And you can start feeding it things that are positive instead of things that are toxic. And if that means that you spend most of your time alone, learn to be okay with that. Because there's worse things than being alone. A lot of times we are so busy trying to figure out what the best thing to do is that we overlook the obvious, which is that the best thing we can possibly do is just not to do anything that harms ourselves or others. It's not about being the best. It's just about doing no harm. It's not about being this larger-than-life Gandhi or Mother Teresa style figure that's just out there radiating love or something like that. It's that you stop engaging actively in the habits that erode trust and reinforce hatred in your heart. It's not that you become outrageously rich. It's just that you stop being outrageously wasteful. It's kind of like the last line of the Wiccan Rede. It says a bunch of different stuff. It's kind of like the Wiccan 10 Commandments. But then it says that it all is summed up with this: do as you wish, but do no harm. And maybe that's just another way of saying the same thing that was said in the Bible, that the greatest commandment is that we love one another. You can't love other people, and you can't love yourself through a lens of slander and confrontation. And you can't break that habit until you're willing to admit that it's wrong. That's our problem in life. We are so unwilling to let things go. We try to figure out how we can have peace in our life, how we can have progress in our life, how we can turn the page. But we don't want to let go of any of the things from the past. We don't want to let go of any of our habits. We don't want to stop nursing those little things that we like that are wrong. We want to hang on to all that old baggage, but we want the future to somehow be different. It's been said that you can't choose to serve God and also choose to serve man, or that you cannot have both the things of the world and the things of heaven, or that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. And all this stuff is just so many words for the same principle. That you have to commit to something. And if you want to commit to something, you have to surrender the things that don't align with it. Ayn Rand once said that if you think that you have encountered a paradox, it doesn't really exist, and you just need to check your premises. you'll find that one of them is wrong. And that's true. Sometimes we say that life doesn't really make sense, or that we can't figure something out. And the truth is not that it's so very hard. It's that we make it hard for ourselves because we refuse to let go of the things that we know we should let go of. And it's really easy to kind of put the blinders on and then just pretend that you're ignorant. It's like somebody that drove their car without ever changing the oil. And then one day it catches up to them. And then they go to the mechanic with this car that has no oil in it because they just drove it into the ground. And then, if they're honest, they know the reason why their car broke down is because they absolutely did not maintain it. But they don't want to admit that. So they go up to the counter and they're just like, oh, I don't know why my car is not working well. Something just randomly must have happened to it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if you are not doing maintenance on the vehicle ever, and you don't ever do the routine oil change, and it's going to catch up to you. And we do that. We make bad decisions and then we act like we're surprised when we fall prey to being the victim of misfortune. Or we do things that are toxic and we embrace things that are cruel. And then we wonder why our lives do not have peace. We know the answer. It's just easy to hide our head in the sand and say, well, if I don't think about it, then I guess I don't know. And if I don't know, then I can just be a victim. When I didn't manage my money very well, there were a lot of times when I would go home and I did not want to check the mailbox because I knew that there were probably going to be bills in there, and I just dreaded it because I knew I wasn't managing my money well. I was procrastinating on everything, and I just had this crushing sense of dread because every time the mail came, it seemed like it might just be another problem coming to catch up with me. And so the temptation started to be, I just won't check the mail today. I'd rather just not check the mail today than to face the reality of the bills in the mailbox. It almost was like, if I don't look at the mail, then maybe they don't exist. I don't have to think about them if they're not on my table in front of me. That's how we live. If we can kick the can down the road a little bit, that's what we do. That's what we do when it comes to having peace in our lives. We think to ourselves, one day it'll all come together. One day I will have peace in my life. One day I'll get to that place where I'm trying to go. And then things will be good. But the truth is, if you can't have peace today, there's never going to be any external factor that's going to produce what isn't there. Because that's what we're doing. When we're distracting ourselves with gossip about people and raging about politics and complaining about our jobs and being frustrated about whatever thing it is, That's all we're doing. We're looking for peace externally, thinking that if we can somehow, win that next argument or that next battle, then we'll be satisfied. But we'll never be satisfied until the day we accept the fact that we don't need to live a life filled with conflict. And when we realize that, and when we really decide we're done, then a lot of these things start to be a lot easier than we ever realized they were. It's like people who have substance abuse problems. And I've seen this. They try to stop drinking or doing drugs or whatever it is. They try to stop over and over again. Maybe somebody helps them get into a rehab clinic or whatever it might be. And they go through this cycle of trying to stop, trying to get themselves cleaned up, trying to get their life under control, saying they're going to change and then they don't change, struggling and struggling and struggling, and nothing ever works. And they feel so hopeless. And then one day, they have a wake-up call. And it's something bad. Like a life-threatening health problem. Or they screw up so bad that their spouse says, "You're very close to not having a family anymore." And then suddenly something changes. And that's the moment when they clean up, they sober up, and they never look back. And and then you find them, and 20, 30 years down the road, they're still sober. And you say, "Well, what happened?" They say, "Well, I stopped." What is it? Yeah, there's a lot of different factors at play there, but at the end of the day, they had to get to the point where that's what they wanted. And for a long time in their lives, they were just playing around. They didn't really want to clean up. They didn't really want to sober up. They just wanted to give lip service to it. And then they wanted to go right back into their old habits. Until the time came when they did want to change. And when that time came, then they did change. It's the same thing with inviting peace into our lives. You're going to be a chaotic, frustrated, conflicted person, governed by frustrations and distractions, until you decide that you don't need those things anymore. Until you decide that you're ready to come home and stop wandering all over the world looking for something far away in hopes that that will give you peace that you couldn't find before. I was watching this video of a guy, and he said he went away from home, from his little home in Ireland, and he traveled all over the world as a young man. Whenever he had any chance to get away, he would go travel as far away as he possibly could to get away from home. And then he'd have to go back, and he'd feel empty, and he'd repeat that cycle until one day he realized that he was looking all over the world for something that could only be found inside his heart. And so he went back to his little hometown, and he started to work on himself. That's what we need to do. And once you start to work on yourself, quietly, privately, without broadcasting it to the world or bragging about it or virtue signaling about it, then you go through a period of time where you realize that you have a lot of work to do. and then you give up some things, and then you realize that it was actually pretty easy. And that's really that's an eye-opening thing, to realize you don't have to achieve greatness with some sort of heroic effort. All you have to do is find the courage and the willingness to let go of the things that deprive you of peace. You don't have to be a great hero to let go of something. And that's a comforting thought. You know, if I had to always know what the right thing to say was, well, that'd be kind of hard. But if all I have to do is do my best and not run my mouth all the time, I mean, how hard is that? Whatever you're doing, strive to have peace. And if it's something that doesn't bear good fruit in your life, let it go. If you're conflicted about things, that doesn't mean you need to figure it all out. It just means that you need to let go of the things that are creating an atmosphere of doubt in your mind. Maybe that means that you walk away from some people. Maybe it means that you walk away from a job. Or maybe it's just a matter of spiritually changing your attitude. And then you'll find that you don't actually have to walk away from the people or the job. You can just let them be them and you do you. And then as for the people that are really, really toxic, the ones that really need to go their separate ways, the ones that really are a hindrance, I've come to realize that if you change your attitude toward life and you prioritize having peace in your life, and you're not confrontational, you're not into the drama, all those toxic people have a tendency to decide that they would rather be somewhere else. And then you don't have to really leave them behind. They will leave you behind. And then when they have made their way off to find greener pastures, you can have peace in the undiscovered country with them. Till next time, thank you very much for watching.